he said, "I'm sure all of those things are true." Right? You go back to the article itself, literally the first paragraph, the first line, neither claim was true when talking about the helicopter and the Secret Service not wanting to drive him there. Hello and welcome to another installment of Political Election 2020, the series where we discuss the onings and goings of the American political landscape and what particularly is happening as America makes its decision on who will be their 45th or 46th president, depending on who wins. I'm joined by Connor Allen.
Hello, everybody.
And I am myself, Aisne Smith, and today we will be talking about the recent claims from The Atlantic about Trump's remarks on the military during his visit to France 2 years ago. What do you think about claims? Yeah, what do you think about
I kind of jumped in a bit early there, but I think it's very important to say we're going to be debunking these claims because we're basically going to be presenting to you guys a bit of the evidence today. We're going to be showing you, they just don't make any sense. And with these sorts of claims, you get them all the time in politics. You get an anonymous source who claims something, and then you're left to make a judgment call. And you have to make the decision whether you believe the anonymous source or you don't. Let me tell you, there's no reason at all to believe an anonymous source. That's what I think.
Sure. We're here as an unbiased source to present the facts, present the evidence for you, and you are, to make up your own mind, to think about this critically and decide for yourself whether there is some validity to these claims. Because in the world of fake news, anonymous sources, we've seen some mind-boggling claims over the years, particularly since Trump became president, and I'm sure that's a coincidence. But this one itself, I just really takes the cake, takes the biscuit, whatever you want to say. This is the equivalent of Trump coming out, an anonymous source coming out and saying that Trump actually secretly loves China, right? Because there are a few things that Trump has been very consistent on. His narrative has been very consistent, and China is one of them, and the military is another. And he's been talking about these things for decades before he was ever campaigning to be president. So,
and if I might just add, these types of claims, these sorts of things, they rely on you not questioning it. As soon as you question it, as soon as you shine a light upon these claims and you examine them with any amount of detail, they tend to fall apart because they are based on a kind of going from A to B via C, they require you making a leap of logic that seems apparent because they don't give you the full fact. So, being the good, honest fact checkers that we are, going to give you the facts.
Yeah, it's the honest system of journalism. It's like, here's a claim with no evidence, but we wouldn't lie to you, right? Let's take a look at the actual article itself in question from The Atlantic. Trump: Americans who died in war are losers and suckers. So the crux of the claim is this: Trump rejected the idea of the visit. This is the visit to France to honour the casualties in the First World War at the American cemetery in Aisne-Marne. So Trump rejected the idea of the visit because he feared his hair would become disheveled in the rain and because he did not believe it important to honour American war dead, according to 4 people with first-hand knowledge of the discussion that day. In a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." In a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives in Belleau Wood as suckers for getting killed.
Mm-hmm.
So the claim, I should add as well. So the initial claim was that the helicopter couldn't fly and the Secret Service wouldn't drive him there. And this is how it was reported at the time. So it was an article from The Hill dated 11th of November 2018, I think the day after. And the White House announced at the time in a statement that the trip had been cancelled due to scheduling and logistical difficulties caused by the weather. Right, so that's the official claim.
I can back that up as well. I remember this article. I remember it at the time, and I remember where I was because I remember this article coming out and the furor because Trump wouldn't visit the cemeteries. And I can confirm, I live in Belgium. It's very close to the cemetery in France. It was raining cats and dogs. It was pouring it down. It was awful weather. I didn't go outside much. I never really go outside much. But it isn't weather I would particularly want to get in a helicopter in.
Okay, there we go. So you have it here, debunked. So we have our own
eyewitness,
unanonymous sources here. Connor Allen. Yeah. So Trump then, well, this is a White House statement or a briefing statement that Trump, I think he was in Pennsylvania at the time, I can't remember, but he said, just let me go into the trip in Europe and to France. I was ready to go to the cemetery. I had two of them. He had two trips to two cemeteries, I think. On the following day, it was pouring, and I went to that, but the helicopter could not fly. The reason it couldn't fly is because it was raining as hard as I've ever seen, and on top of that, it was very, very foggy, and the helicopter was unable to fly. It was a fairly long helicopter flight, but it was a very long drive. So that's basically the idea. That's the argument. Oh, he didn't go because he has no respect for veterans, because he was afraid about his hair getting messed up. And his claim is, no, I was told we can't go because logistically we couldn't go, right? So even Michael Bolton. Oh, I should just say, have you got anything to add to that at this point before we move on?
Well, I think I might just, if I can take the opportunity to explain for our American viewers, the countryside of France, it isn't like the countryside in America. There are very long, windy roads, and there's just no exits on any of them. You can be driving for 30 minutes, and all you're seeing is vineyards. You'll have no mobile phone signal. I think a lot of these articles try to imply that, when the weather is the reason for the trip being cancelled, it's because he doesn't particularly want to get wet in the rain or something. It's not. It's if a car breaks down in the middle of rural France, you're going to be stuck there for the best part of a day, or you can get a mechanic there, or if, something catastrophic happens and you need to contact the president immediately, there's no phone mass in the middle of France. In some areas of the country, it's just completely barren and empty.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's just what I'd like to add with my first-hand eyewitness knowledge of La France.
Okay. Well, I think I actually think you're very well positioned to talk about this, and because obviously you live so close to the area and you know a lot about the area. I think it's really insightful actually for a lot of people who are listening and hearing us talk about this. You're someone who can give first-hand accounts in your own experience to actually back up some of these claims and some of the things that are talked about this. So Michael Bolton himself, the gospel himself, if you are on the left, then everything that Michael Bolton has ever said in the last 2 months is complete truth, right? So
no doubt on any of it.
And even in Michael Bolton's book, he wrote about an account of this situation, and he said Marine One's crew were saying that bad visibility would make it imprudent to chop her to the cemetery. The ceiling was not too low for Marines to fly into in combat, but flying POTUS was obviously something very different. If a motorcade was necessary, it would take between 90 and 120 minutes each way along roads that are not exactly freeways. And I think he's referring to those rural vineyard areas that you're talking about.
You can get stuck behind a tractor for hours and hours, and there's just no way around it.
Posing an unacceptable risk that we could not get the president out of France quickly enough in case of an emergency. And I think this is possibly a lot of things, something that I hadn't really thought about this and considered this myself until we were digging. The president isn't just, going about doing his stuff day to day as a normal citizen would. Everything is quite precariously planned ahead. And his travel arrangements and where he was going and how he was going to do things are planned way in advance, so that the situation is that if the president is ever needed, that he can be contacted, that he can be taken out of an area if he needs to. What if, worst case scenario, a war broke out, or something, obviously it might seem a bit extreme, but any scenario you can think where, okay, we need to get in touch with the president and we need to take him somewhere, or we need to get him back to the White House to have a briefing or whatever, that needs to be a possibility, right?
Absolutely. And even not disregarding the worst case scenario, like you say, I've worked with politicians, I've planned their schedules, and especially when you're away from your home country, where, he has a job to do in America, right? He's visiting France. Every single second of the president's day is taken up by something. You will schedule in 10 minutes for rest. You will schedule in 5 minutes for a meal if he's lucky. Otherwise, he's, munching on a sandwich on the road. You don't have the time to spend 2 hours going to him to make a speech at the cemetery and then 2 hours back. If those things fluctuate, you lose the entire trip. That could be a meeting with a world leader. It could be anything.
Sure. So you would agree that this makes sense. The rationale behind this then makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even bat an eyelid. If I was working with a politician and we had to cancel a very, very long trip to go somewhere simply because, the time constraints weren't possible anymore. It's nothing to blink at. It's just part and parcel of working in politics.
Right. And I think even Bolton kind of echoes this as well. He said it was a straightforward decision to cancel the visit. And as well, just to add, it was Kelly, so he was the chief of staff at the time, who has a military record, right? Who was the one that had recommended the trip, right? It was one that recommended they go on the trip to the cemetery. And it was him that obviously had to deliver the news. Logistically, it's not something that we should be doing. We shouldn't be taking that risk. So there's a real motive for him to go on the trip from everyone involved. And then we've got these first-hand accounts of the situation that just completely discredit everything that was said from the original article. And you have Jeffery Goldberg, the guy who wrote it. He's the editor-in-chief at the Atlantic. And when he was confronted with this account by Bolton, he said, "I'm sure all of those things are true." Right? You go back to the article itself. Literally the first paragraph, the first line, neither claim was true when talking about the helicopter and the Secret Service not wanting to drive him there. The first paragraph, the second line, he says that wasn't true, but then admits that probably is true when confronted about Michael Bolton's account in his book. So I don't understand the rationale behind what he's saying when he's confronted with all this conflicted evidence.
Well, I think, nobody understands the rationale because there is no rationale. The guy's been caught out, and he's been caught out on national television He's basically been called out in front of the entire nation that he's contradicting himself. So he's trying to backpedal, you know?
Yeah, so it's about the most obvious attempt at backtracking you can possibly see. What I think frustrates me, though, is when, you know, the media gets it wrong sometimes, obviously, right? And you see in articles a lot of the time, they will edit things and say, oh, well, actually, on further blah, 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 this and this. So why can they have this line still in there?
Absolutely.
On its own, it's on its own line as well, like almost to bring attention to it. Neither claim was true. When he himself is admitting in an interview that those things are likely true.
It's misleading information because he couldn't prove that it was true at the time. Well, sorry, he couldn't prove that neither claim was true at the time, because it's well documented that these things are going on. He couldn't dismiss that the weather was the reason the trip was cancelled at the time. He's presented a claim, it's unsubstantiated, and furthermore, he has himself said that it's true. Basically, it's misleading information, it's misleading Americans, and the mainstream media are taking this line, and it's only those 4 words, and they're using it to attack Donald Trump.
Sure. And as well, to talk about more evidence that we can have to refute this. So obviously this has come from, I believe, 4 anonymous sources or whatever. So here's another unanonymous source, someone that's ready to go on record. So Zach Fuentes, the deputy chief of staff at the time. So you had Kelly was the chief of staff. Obviously Michael Bolton, the national security advisor, a senior one at that as well. And then obviously Zach Fuentes, who is the deputy White House chief of staff. So these people basically are following the president around, like whenever he's going anywhere, right? They're basically in the room with him all the time. When you're talking about top aides, these are the top aides. So who are these anonymous sources who are top aides, if we've got other top aides here who would have been the first to hear this conversation, who are all denying it?
So these anonymous sources can't hold a flame to senior government officials and the highest or senior aides in the land. And it's not like these people are reliant on Trump or they have anything to gain from supporting Trump. Michael Bolton is pretty much enemy number 1 for Trump now, right? But he himself is corroborating Trump's story. So I don't know, it's kind of like me turning around right now and saying Joe Biden said something racist to me. But, you know, we met a few years ago, me and old Joe were good chums, and, you know, he was telling me how much he hates black people. It's exactly that. There's no credibility to my claims there, so therefore there's no credibility to these anonymous sources there.
Right. And so Fuentes himself, he said, you can put me on record denying that I spoke with The Atlantic. I don't know who the sources are. I did not hear the POTUS call anyone losers when I told him about the weather. Honestly, do you think General Kelly would have stood by and let anyone call fallen Marines losers? So I think, for me, I'm going to sort of speculate, I guess, what I might consider the truth in all of this. And this is a narrative that makes much more sense to me. And obviously, if people want to, you know, go along with that, and if they think, okay, that makes sense, then obviously great, because this is what I think is the truth. So I think The Atlantic, which is owned by people who have donated significant amounts of money to Biden, I think that they wanted to use their platform of owning this media source to find a way to discredit Trump. They identified his approval among military personnel as something that is dangerous to the Biden campaign, and something that is probably one of Trump's biggest strengths when it comes to his campaign and his voter base. They said, how can we find a way to get these people to dislike Trump? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to make up a story. We're going to back it up with anonymous sources. So there's absolutely no accountability. There's no way of saying, well, who are your sources? You know, we're going to hear, we want to hear it say themselves. We want them to testify or have, you know, because if Trump wasn't president and if this was just a simple case of defamation or something like that, those people would have to testify. I forgot what it's called now, but where they basically go usually just on camera or something like that, a deposition. Sorry, yeah. So they have to go in a deposition and repeat these claims, right, and have to presumably back it up with something, right? So I believe that this is just an open and closed case on just a simple tactic by the left-wing media to try and discredit Trump, to try and hurt his campaign.
And what you present, I mean, it's very likely, like you say, the Atlantic is majority owned by people with close links to the Democratic Party. The editors, the authors might have a personal interest in promoting the Democratic Party or attacking Donald Trump. You might question it. The viewer, you might question whether there is a Democratic conspiracy or something. But what you can't question is that the Atlantic profits from this. In every single mainstream media news outlet right now, there's one word being repeated over and over and over, and it's the Atlantic. There must be such a huge increase in traffic to this website. Think of the ad revenue. They're getting hundreds and thousands of dollars for this, and they're getting hundreds of thousands of page views, and they're getting hundreds of thousands of readers, viewers, whatever you want to call it. But if you deny that Jeffery Goldberg has an interest in supporting the Democratic Party, you cannot deny he has an interest in profit, because that's exactly what they're doing, it's profit. So you, the viewer, have to make a judgment call. Is it likely that this anonymous source, who's overheard, or he claims the president wanted to cancel a visit to a cemetery because he considers the Marines there losers and suckers, despite the fact there's evidence that the trip was cancelled for another reason, despite the fact you have an enemy of Donald Trump refuting that in a book, despite the fact you have first-hand evidence, witnesses denying it, is that more likely than either the Democratic Party being shored up by these people, or they just simply want to profit? And bear in mind, it's 60 days before an election too. Why has it been sat still for 2 years, do you think?
Right, exactly, yeah. This happened 2 years ago, and it's the same with the Michael Bolton book. It's the same with all of these people. They've all got something in common, right? One, they've been fired by Trump. They're just disgruntled employees in many ways, right? A lot of these people are just disgruntled employees. People like Michael Bolton, like the swamp cretin that he is, has been in and around.
Harsh words, yeah. Harsh words.
He's allegedly. He has been in and around these administrations for decades now at this point, since Bush, right? With his neoconservative agenda, trying to cause as many wars as he possibly can, right? You've got people like him coming out writing his book for profit. He wants to profit off it. He's got a bone to pick with Trump. He's angry that he's fired him when everyone else, when the administrations that he worked with, listened to him and respected him. Trump has this habit of making these enemies because he will not stand for. I mean, this is okay. It's my view, but I think he doesn't stand for people in his administration that he doesn't believe has the same motives as him when it comes to doing best for Americans, right? And these are people that have been in and around these administrations for a long time, and for years and years and years they've been bought for, paid for, sold their soul to several devils and demons over the years. And they have absolutely no respect for the American people. And everything that they do is for their own self-gain. And Trump gets rid of them, and they're angry and they're mad. And they're like, how can we get back at Trump? That's all this is, as far as I'm concerned. Listen, it may even be that these anonymous sources exist, right? Maybe they do. And if they do I think there's any truth to what they said? No, because it makes sense for them to collude together to come up with this story, to try and attack Trump, to find a new stick to beat him with, because they don't have any. They've got the worst candidate the Democrats have ever had up against this guy, and to distract away from all of the issues going on with Biden himself and their campaign, instead of trying to promote Biden, because it's impossible, they just look for things to attack Trump for. And this is another example of it. And I just, I don't want to ramble on, but when we're talking of, like, when you go to a court of law, what the lawyers talk about, they talk about motive, right? What is the motive here for?
It's only one motive.
Yeah. What is the motive for the fired anonymous sources, if they exist? It's to get back at Trump. What is the motive of the Atlantic here? It's to help Biden, who they donate to. It's to help themselves by driving traffic towards their website. Like you said, they're spoken about. This article has been spoken about everywhere, right? And what's the motive of Trump? To say this to people that, he knows that if he fires or if anything happens down the line, they're going to come back and use this. Why would he say these things to people? Even if he believed them, why would he say them? And
why would he cancel the cemetery trip where he's going to make a speech, because it was the centenary of the First World War, right? The end of the First World War. He's making a big speech, world leaders, and it's going to be televised. It's going to show America's leadership in the world. There is no reason for him not to go. But there is one reason. There is no motive. The idea of the president saying, yeah, I don't really want to go to this huge, amazing event because, I don't like the Marines there. They're losers and suckers. It baffles belief that anyone could believe that.
Listen, I just hope that this does not sway any opinions, right? If there's people out there obviously voting for Biden for X, Y, and Z, fine, great, brilliant, all the power to you. That's democracy. That's what the democracy is about. What I just hate to believe is that there's going to be people who, in my opinion, Trump is doing a really good job for the military, and any military personnel are going to fare much better under a Trump presidency for 4 years than they are under a Biden presidency. And I just hope that fake news media here has not swayed any opinions, because it would be a real shame.
Absolutely. I agree.
So I think we should close up on that note, and just to everyone that's listening, please subscribe. Please click the bell. The bell icon will give you a notification every time we get a new video out. And we're doing videos now pretty much every sort of two or 3 days. We're trying to offer some insight, offer some new opinions on things, and try and put some content out there that's going to be good for people who are after a bit of commentary and a bit of truth on what's going on in the election cycle right now, especially with all of this fake news media going around. So subscribe, and please as well comment if you have any opinion on anything we've talked about. Have we missed something? Do you disagree? We want to hear. And it just really helps the channel out as well. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.